And we kick things off with a look at the competing messages from the two candidates for President of the United States.
I see an America where we hold fast to the fearless belief that built our nation.
We are indeed a nation in decline.
It is now our turn to do what generations before us have done, guided by optimism.
It's a massive invasion at our southern border that has spread misery, crime, poverty, disease, and destruction.
I will be a president who unites us.
Crazy Nancy Pelosi.
Who is realistic.
The biggest rallies you've ever seen.
Practical.
Build an Iron Dome over our country.
And has common sense.
The late, great Hannibal Lecter. He'd love to have you for dinner.
And I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families.
The head of the Taliban, you call me Your Excellency. I wonder if he calls the other guy Your Excellency. I doubt it.
I will always honor and never disparage their service.
Our military is not woke. It's just some of the fools on top that are woke.
I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un.
North Korea, Kim Jong-un, I got along very well with him.
Donald Trump, he was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans.
We will return law and order to our streets.
Separately found liable for committing sexual abuse.
We will launch a new era of safety.
You can always trust me to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power.
We had that horrible, horrible result that we'll never let happen again. The election result, we're never going to let that happen again. They used COVID to cheat. We're never going to let it happen again.
Oh, Jonathan Lemire, that is quite a contrast.
Quite a contrast.
Claire McCaskill, Eddie Glaude Jr. still with us. And joining the conversation, we have NBC News national affairs analyst and a partner and chief political columnist at Puck, John Heilemann, author and NBC News presidential historian Michael Beschloss, and associate professor of political science at Fordham University, Christina Greer. Good to have you all with us this hour.
So, Willie, the contrast is so great. It is so extreme. It is optimism versus pessimism. It is joy versus resentment. It is looking toward the future versus looking for retribution. It is a striking choice. I will say it seems like no choice to me. It seems very simple. You don't vote for the guy that actually started a riot and is still praising those rioters and now going to be holding fundraisers to benefit those rioters. But this is a close race. Democrats should listen to Michelle Obama and understand this is a close race and they're going to have to fight to the last second.
Yeah.
Without question. And we did, to the credit of some of the speakers last night, we heard that theme last night, which is the magic that we're all feeling in this room last night, talking about the Democrats who were here. It's great for this week. Now we got to capture it, bottle it, and push forward. Get out on the road tomorrow. Volunteer. Get out the vote. Do all the things that have to be done. It's not about a convention, one of them said. This isn't the end of something. This is the beginning. And I think part of what the party had to accomplish this week was to assure Democrats we've got this. We understand things have felt a little shaky since that debate a couple of months ago. You weren't sure if the president was going to stay in the race. You weren't sure if he got out who would come next, if that person could do the job. The Democratic Party saying we've got this. And John Heilemann, the speech last night from Vice President Harris went a long way in terms of assuring voters across the country. And she made that contrast that Joe just referenced, which is laying out her bio, talking about her career as a prosecutor. She said, I was always for the people. I was here to represent the people. She threaded that into all the work she's done since then, and then came around and laid out Donald Trump's life and his political career and said he has always been for himself. And there's the contrast.
The back when Joe Biden went to the debate in Atlanta, Jen O'Malley Dillon came on my podcast, and the campaign was out saying, "We now have our frame for this election. He's all about himself. We're all about you." And one of the things that became evident was that Joe Biden wasn't going to make that case as forcefully as possible, as forcefully as necessary. Last night, Kamala Harris made that case in 7 different ways, and she made it directly in a kind of prosecutorial way when she did that riff. Consider Donald Trump. Consider. She sounded very much like the lawyer that she is. But the contrast of we're about you, he's about himself. It was made implicitly and explicitly. It was made directly and indirectly. It was woven throughout. And to go to one of the most striking contrasts, I think, for the thing that I kept hearing from people who were non-political friends of mine last night, I didn't know how hawkish she was on foreign policy, people would say. The language, the use of words like lethal, security, that were just woven throughout her speech, the invocations of, in a very forceful way, of the embrace of the flag, the embrace of normalcy, of patriotism in a kind of unabashed way. That, again, we saw it for 4 straight days here, but her speech last night was a kind of, I won't call it a work of art, but it was a very, people go back and take that speech apart in a variety of ways and look at all of the different kinds of movements in it that allowed her to keep making those very consistent narrative and contrast points that were throughout these 4 days. She made them in all kinds of ways, just saying really, really effectively.
Yeah, and threading the needle on the question of Gaza, which has hovered over this, saying, quote, "To be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself." Making clear we support Israel, we stand shoulder to shoulder, but we have to stop the suffering in Gaza, saying she's going to work toward a ceasefire deal. Claire, one of the other themes we heard all week, and Vice President Harris really drilled in last night, was that we're not going backward. And I think that gets to a sentiment that almost everybody in this country feels, which is we're exhausted by this. We don't want to wake up every morning and see what the president said or did or tweeted or who he insulted or how he embarrassed us. And she's saying effectively, we got to go that way. We can't go back there.
You know, this is what really Trump is struggling with, because overnight, Kamala Harris became the candidate of change. And if you look historically at presidential elections, people who make up their mind at the end have a tendency to go towards the candidate they think is most likely to change things. And she is now the candidate of change. You know how happy the campaign was this morning when headlines across the country were "a new way forward"? She is no longer somebody who is the vice president. She is a presidential candidate. And, you know, the contrast that you've referred to, John, I thought one of the most effective ways she did it when she said, "The only client I've ever had is the people," which is very unusual for a lawyer. But she can say that with complete accuracy. And then she turned and said, the only client he's ever had is himself. So I think they've pulled off something that for a sitting vice president who you think would be cloaked in incumbency, she's now the new kid in town.
The Democratic National Convention over, and only 74 days until the election. The real test now begins on the road to the White House. Kamala Harris now topping the ticket instead of Joe Biden. How has that changed the path to 270 electoral votes for the Democrats? There is no one better to ask than NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki, who joins us now from the big board. Steve, so much has happened in such a short amount of time, and the math has changed, the battleground map. She's got different paths, according to early polling.
Yeah, Andrea, I think that's the story. It's still a very tight race, but it has changed in the last month. We'll show you how. Big picture is this. Look, as Joe Biden was getting out of the race, this is what the polling was showing. He was down 3 points on average against Donald Trump. Now, about a month of Kamala Harris as the new Democratic candidate, on average, Harris up 2. So from Democrats down 3 to Democrats up 2. What is behind that move forward for Harris in the polling? 3 groups in particular where she's performed exceptionally better than Biden had been performing. And they're groups of voters who Democrats have in the past relied on, that Biden had been lagging with. Black voters. Harris is running 8 points better on average than Biden had been with black voters. Hispanic voters, Harris 10 points better than Biden. Young voters, those under 30, Harris 11 points better than Biden. These were all, we talked so much with Biden as the Democratic candidate about there being potential slack in the Democratic coalition. That's less the case, the polling is telling us right now, with Harris as the Democratic candidate. What would that translate into in terms of this road to 270 map that we're going to be returning to so much between now and November? Well, a couple things here. In gray, you've got kind of the core battleground states, and already you may notice most of this year we were really talking about 6. Now there's 7. There's North Carolina. Democrats have been talking all year about trying to make this a battleground. They were talking about that when Biden was the candidate, but now with Harris as the candidate, partly maybe due to the improvement in black support that you just see in the polls there. North Carolina, there's been a couple polls out showing basically a dead even race, maybe even Harris ahead very, very slightly in the polling there. So suddenly you can definitely put North Carolina in that battleground. The improvement Harris has with Hispanic voters, state like Arizona, state like Nevada. These are states where Trump had been polling very well against Joe Biden. Harris showing improvements here, too. Essentially, Andrea, what it comes down to is this. For Democrats, when Joe Biden was the candidate, it was a real narrow path that they'd been left with. Biden was going to have to win. Democrats were going to have to win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And you can see with those 3, it would get them to 270 exactly. Not an inch to spare. They'd have to win all 3 of those. But with Harris and those improvements we've seen so far demographically for her, to have a Nevada, to have an Arizona, even to have a North Carolina potentially, really potentially in play, it could relieve some of the pressure on Harris and Democrats to go 3 for 3 in those Great Lakes, Big Ten states, however you exactly want to categorize them, and maybe open up a bit of a Sunbelt path. So it simply means a month into Harris as the Democratic candidate, there's more pathways, at least potentially, for Democrats. Now we're going to see, as this convention ends and the real general election takes off, how does that evolve from here? Does that remain the case? Does Trump make more gains? But for now, more paths for Democrats.
And the other factor that was being discussed on the floor last night, Steve, is the impact that she's having on down ballot races, that some of these so-called safe Senate seats were really endangered because Joe Biden was stuck so low in the polls, and that she narrowing that gap, some of those senators were leading the top of the ticket. Now it's much narrower, and they are in better shape, the senators. That's what they were saying, at least.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you could talk, look at a state like, Arizona and Nevada. These are states with, battleground Senate races. And the story, Democrats have been performing pretty well in the Senate polls. The fear for Democrats has been, though, as well as these Senate candidates are polling, if you get to the presidential election, if Trump ends up carrying the state, does it end up having, that sort of the rising tide lifts all boats effects on the other Republicans running? If Harris, though, is able to win in an Arizona, if she were able to win in Nevada, I don't know if she will, but the possibility certainly seems to exist right now. That would only help fortify Democrats in those states, certainly from their perspective.
Yeah, and the fact that they just couldn't overcome it if Biden were still stuck as the top of the ticket, we're stuck in the mid-30s. That's not the kind of gap that, that you can overcome. Thank you, Steve Kornacki, as always.
While Vice President Harris broke barriers and made history last night, her opponent is hoping to deliver a compelling counter-argument today. Trump is heading to Las Vegas, where he'll host a no tax on tips event this afternoon before a rally tonight in Glendale, Arizona.
But the former president has had some difficulty staying on message after Harris delivered her speech. He dialed into Fox News for an interview that was ultimately cut off by the Fox host. Here's part of that.
No, she's not having success. I'm having success. No, it's only in your eyes that they have that, Martha. We're doing very well in the polls. We're leading in most of the polls. And in the swing states, we're leading in almost every one of them.
Mr. President,
in Michigan,
let me interrupt.
They threw Joe Biden out of the party.
And that's why we saw a different night tonight.
Mr. President, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate that live feedback.
Right. Stay right there. Live edition of Gutfeld is coming up.
That wasn't my fault, Donald Trump. He's still talking, by the way.
And joining us now is NBC's Jonathan Allen, also Tolu Olorunipa, Washington Post White House bureau chief. So, Jonathan, what did the timing and the substance of Trump's rebuttal signal to you?
Well, I think he's angry that he's not at the center of attention and has not been for the last few weeks. He's going, I think more and more to the most desperate bag of tricks that he has to kind of command attention. It was on the disarray among Democrats after the late June debate. And then it has been on Kamala Harris for pretty much every moment since she was elevated to be the Democratic nominee, and certainly during her convention. And Trump has difficulty with that. He can't stand it. Last night was a moment of a historic moment, the nomination of the first black woman for a major party, in history. And Trump was, she was reaching for history, and he was reaching for a gaslight.
Lou, before he dialed into Fox, Trump was live reacting to Harris's speech on his Truth Social platform, literally dozens and dozens of posts. We don't have any more room on our graphic to show them all, but they were kind of all over the place. At one point, he went back to his argument that undocumented immigrants are taking black jobs. Trump has downplayed the calls from the allies of his to be more disciplined in his attacks. What are the risks for him politically in continuing to go to those kind of same old playbook moves?
Yeah, this is a truncated campaign. It is shortened. It is a 100-day sprint to the presidency. And every day that Donald Trump spends flailing on multiple different issues, not having a clear line of attack against Kamala Harris, is a day lost. And I think his campaign advisors know this. They are scrambling, trying to set up these events that are supposed to be policy focused. But when he can call into Fox News or Newsmax and just start spouting off at the mouth, it's going to make it very difficult for them to come up with a clear line of attack against Kamala Harris and a clear rationale for why she should not be the next president. And so he is losing his advantage, the advantage that he had against Joe Biden, and he is clearly rattled by it, and it's making it very hard for him to stay consistent and stay on message. And it seems like every day we're getting a different message from him, and it's going to be very difficult with this shortened campaign for him to be able to showcase why Kamala Harris should not continue this momentum that she's had over the past several weeks.
And Jonathan, Trump did post one tweet on X during his social media blitz. He posted both on Truth Social and X, thanking Georgia Governor Brian Kemp for all his help. You'll remember that Trump picked a fight with Kemp during a rally just a couple of weeks ago. What does this show you?
It shows me, number one, that his aides have had some influence, gotten his ear, and told him that it was pretty dumb to attack the popular governor of Georgia at a time when he is vulnerable to losing Georgia again. And it tells me that he's using, using Twitter, his home back on Twitter, to do some of the communication outside of his own base. There are people outside of his base that will follow him on Twitter that will not follow him on Truth Social. But look, he does damage to himself, and this is an attempt to repair it. And you wonder how many voters in Georgia decided to heck with him the last time he went after Brian Kemp.
Lou, Vice President Harris made a concerted effort last night in her speech to make her pitch to not just Democrats, but to Republicans and independents. Are there any signs that's breaking through?
Well, you can also look at the people who were on stage before Kamala Harris, including Representative Adam Kinzinger, a Republican who was in Congress and who broke with Trump when he was in office. We saw during this 4-day convention a number of outreaches to Republicans and moderate voters, and Kamala Harris continued that with her speech. And it's clear that there are voters who don't like Trump and who aren't yet sure about Kamala Harris. They weren't in Biden's camp, but they are giving an open ear to Harris and thinking that maybe they would cast a vote in support of her if she can give an olive branch, if she can push back against these attacks that she's a radical leftist, that she's a San Francisco liberal, that she wants to be extreme and invoke communism on the country. She presented a very different message, a very different profile to those voters. And it's clear from what we've heard so far, just in the few hours after the speech, that those voters are listening, their ears are perked up, and they are considering voting for her. And it's one of the things that's driving Donald Trump crazy, that, Kamala Harris is reaching into his base, reaching into the people who would would have voted for him if it was a Trump-Biden match. And now all of a sudden they are drifting away from Trump. And we were seeing that in all the polls that we've seen, despite the fact that he is citing a number of polls that we have not seen that show that he's ahead. It seems like the polling is showing the momentum going in the opposite direction towards Kamala Harris and away from Donald Trump.
And Chris Matthews, why does this matter? I remember you saying something a long time ago. I hope you remember saying it. Maybe you only said it one time, but it stuck with me as I was driving through working neighborhoods. You know, you grew up in a working class neighborhood in Philly, and you said, you know what the working guy has? You know what the little guy has? He's got the flag. That's what he's got. And he puts it out in front of his house because that's what he's got. It represents the country he loves, and it represents everything that he's striving to be. And as I saw those flags last night, I was thinking, yeah, that is such a powerful message to people who used to think they automatically had to vote Republican.
Yeah, well, you're right. I did say that. It was the guy who told me that. It's all we've got. It's all I've got. It's the flag. It's my country. It's where I served in the military. You know, last night and this whole week has been unbelievable for the Democrats. The USA, the anthem that you could hear underpinning every speech, including last night's by Kamala, you kept hearing that anthem of "I love this country." Everything. The speechwriters, I'm telling you, people don't talk about the speechwriters. They put those speeches together. Michelle's speech was unbelievable, too. It was unbelievable. But it wasn't just the drama, the way she presented. It's the words she used about, you know, it's just the language about it being a black job that Trump's going for. That's who he's running against, an American woman of color. He's running against her for a black job. It was a riot that she could nail that so well. But the balloons came down. I've been to a half-century of Democratic conventions, and I got to tell you, back to 72, and I got to tell you, the balloons coming down in that cascade, it didn't just a few balloons came down. They kept coming down everywhere, gigantic balloons. The kids were playing with them. It was amazingly produced. It was well produced, especially Tuesday night and last night. Really well produced. The speechwriters got together with the candidates and the politicians, and they worked it out so it was truly their speeches. Grandpa Finnegan, I kept thinking, Kamala has learned a lot in politics over the years. One of the things she learned about is talk about your parents and your grandparents. Bring it home to people. Because when you say Grandpa Finnegan, how many times did Biden talk about his grandpa Finnegan and what his father said when he said Joey or his mother said Joey? This homegrown feeling. She got it last night. She talked about her mother, her Indian mother, and how she taught her all these things, all these basic bromides, if you will, about life. And she didn't quote some philosopher. She quoted her mother, who had come over here in '59. I thought it was great about her. And I hope the Democrats, I'll say one measure, the thing that I believe, and I may not agree with the left on this, the hard left. They got us, if they do get into the White House, and it looks like they can do it, be like this when you're in office. Don't switch back to the old hard left. Do this, even if it's tougher to get some Republican votes. Be like this. Be like last night. Diverse. Last night, it wasn't just Trump's carnage speech or debasing Medal of Honor winners and all that horrible stuff. It was the look of the audience last night. It's more diverse than any church you'll go to or synagogue. I'm telling you, it was everybody there. The music, everything was black music, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of culture in the air. So they were saluting that to the people. They weren't just saying America in theory. They loved the room they were in last night. Right. And I think that was so powerful to look at that room. They got to bring that room into America the next couple months. They got to act middle of the road, generic Democrats. That's what she's seen as right now. A general, run-of-the-mill, regular Democrat. Not a lefty, not on the hard left, a prosecutor prosecuting a bad guy, but a regular Democrat. That's a good feeling. Black or white, regular Democrats are not feared. It's the hard left they fear, and we got to beat history on this one.
Data point on that. Before Joe Biden dropped out of the race, there was a poll that was Joe Biden against generic Republican, and generic Republican won by like 6 points. Then it was Donald Trump versus generic Democrat. The Democrat won by 7 points. And that's, again, she's doing a lot to again, try to stay more in the middle, like you're saying, Chris, which actually, ironically, that's, if you look at her career, that's where she is. Like 2020 was a stretch when the Democratic Party in the primary had gone far left, and she was trying to fit into that box. And people say, well, why does she look so awkward at times then, but not now? It's because she was trying to follow where the party was. This actually is a more comfortable fit. You know, Simone, we had talked to Elizabeth Warren earlier, talking about how progressives throughout the Biden administration have been patient. Mm-hmm. They've been pragmatic. They haven't done what right-wingers in Trump's party has done, which is to make Americans go, what? What's wrong with those people? And it reminds me of, like, the Logan Roy line in Succession, which was the line of the season, probably the best television line of the year. You're not serious people. And when you look at the Republicans and what they're doing, you sit there, you go, you just look at Donald Trump's tweets. You're not serious people. You look at those Democrats last night, a ton of progressives in that hall, ton of progressives saying, we're in it to win it. I mean, that's a serious party. Yeah. That's a party that has their eyes on the prize, and they're not going to let ideology get in the way.
Yeah, I mean, this was a convention, I think, that was built to crescendo up to the moment that we saw last night with Vice President Harris accepting the nomination. And the people, I think everybody in that building, and definitely everyone on the dais on the stage, understood the assignment. And they know that there is a fight that is going to ensue coming out of this. To be very clear, September 6th, people start voting in Pennsylvania, as we have talked about. September 6th, people start voting. Wow. This is going to be a close election. You know, I am one of the people that believe the election wasn't just close between Biden and Trump when he was at the top of the ticket because people didn't like Joe Biden. I think the election was close because people wanted there are people that want what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are selling. And I think Vice President Harris understood that. I think moments of this week really felt like a huge celebration. The Vice President did not go out there last night and take a victory lap. She went out there last night. She told people who she was, what she believed, what kind of president she would be, where she stood on a number of key policy issues.
The threat of a Trump presidency?
The threat of a Trump. She prosecuted the case. She laid out the argument. She essentially said, I am a patriot. He is not. Mm-hmm. I will defend this country. He will not. I am like you. He is not like us, essentially, is what she said, in painting her story. And then told people they're going to have to fight. And join me. They're going to have to vote. She said all of those pieces. She was, you know, she looked like she was going to work. Yeah. She looked like she could step off that stage and go into the Situation Room. And that is the tone and tenor that Democrats are going to need to carry over these next couple of weeks, because it is going to be a fight. And, you know, I travel all around and I'm talking to people and they're like, oh, I feel like it'll be a landslide. And I'm like, it won't be.
No. This one, we are a 47 nation. I remember back when Joe Biden was having some challenges and Republicans were saying it's over. I said, it's a 47 nation. Democrats are excited now. It's a 47 nation. Right. This is blocking and tackling now. And who does the best in blocking and tackling? To borrow from Coach Walz, that's the team that wins.
We have
so you're exactly right.
About her mother.
And we start with new video and the first public comments from Vice President Kamala Harris since accepting the Democratic nomination at the historic Democrats convention. Here it is. Late this afternoon, Vice President Harris and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff at Chicago O'Hare Airport, getting ready to fly to D.C. Harris showing some confidence, saying she will, quote, win. Watch this. We're gonna win, projecting confidence. Harris becoming the first woman of color to accept a major party presidential nomination. Harris and her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, have no public events scheduled for this weekend. They will hit the trail next week. The Campaign says they will also do their first joint interview next week, although we don't yet have details on it. Today, Americans are waking up to headlines like these. The New York Times and the Washington Post calling Harris's speech historic. Politico writing about convention attendees openly discussing whether Harris is now, quote, the leader of a political movement. Harris pairing a searing indictment of Trump and MAGA with a forward-looking message around the themes of unity and joy.
I will be a president who unites us around our highest aspirations. Get this, he plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. They are out of their minds. Trump won't hold autocrats accountable because he wants to be an autocrat himself. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. I promise to be a president for all Americans. Together, let us write the next great chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told.
During her speech, a New York Times photographer capturing this striking moment. That is Harris's great niece, Amara, and she's looking on. The picture capturing hope and the idea that in America, you can grow up to be whatever you want if you work hard towards it. Late today, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. suspending his campaign and endorsing Donald Trump. Tonight on The Beat, we have an extraordinary lineup of guests. Acclaimed New York Times columnist Jamelle Bouie is here. The first Black woman senator, Ambassador Carol Moseley Braun, Kamala Harris's sorority sister, Jill Lewis, and Keith Ellison, Minnesota's Attorney General. But we begin with our power panel tonight. Aisha Mills, Democratic strategist, Jason Johnson, politics professor with Morgan State University and an MSNBC political analyst, and Stephanie Brown James, who worked on the Obama campaign and is co-founder of the Collective PAC. Whew, okay. Who, just, a show of hands, who felt like this convention was really 3 years in, but it was only 4 days? Okay, show of hands. Okay, it was power packed. Jason, I'm going to just start with you. What was your take on this week, the story that Democrats told, and culminating in the historic nomination of Vice President Harris just last night?
Simone, the first thing that just kept occurring to me after every night of sort of really impressive and creative speeches is, oh my God, there is an Earth 2 and an alternative universe where this was an open convention and it was a mess, right? Like every single night that the Democrats got together and had a clear, coherent message was a reminder that there were Democratic elites out there that wanted this to be an open convention and it would have been absolute chaos, whereas what we actually got for a week was smooth, consistent messaging, inclusive messaging, except for some very key constituencies. And it ended with a really impressive speech by Vice President Harris. And as someone who has seen her speak going all the way back to when she first ran for the Senate, I've seen her speak in person. Arguably, this is not a cliche. It's probably one of the best speeches I've ever seen her give. And given that this is someone who has only been on the campaign trail for about a month, that is quite an accomplishment. The week pretty much went off without a hitch. I don't think the Democrats could be unhappy about anything.
Well, look, Stephanie, to that point, I think the vice president has only been the candidate for a month, and it is just remarkable, truly, that a month ago, Joe Biden was the Democrats' nominee. And just yesterday, Kamala Harris was accepted the nomination due to, frankly, maneuvering by President Biden. While he was playing chess, others were playing checkers, and he specifically, when he dropped out, he endorsed the vice president. Stephanie, I'm just wondering, your organization works to build Black political power, and I have to imagine that Vice President Harris, now at the top of the ticket as a Democratic nominee, just really has been a boon to those efforts. And this is not just about the presidential. What I also saw this week at that convention is there are a lot of down ballot races that are going to matter here, and those were also highlighted on the stage.
Definitely. The fact that we were able to see Shamari Figures on the stage, he is a candidate in Alabama too, a newly created district there. For him to have the opportunity to speak just shows the power of having Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. We were honored to first endorse her in 2016 when she was running for Attorney General. And so to now just to see her where she is at, I am so happy that you brought up the fact that when Joe Biden passed the baton to her by endorsing her immediately after he stepped down, it was a signal that the tide has changed. A new generation is ready to step into leadership. And here's the thing. She may have only been running as the presidential nominee for just a few weeks. This lady has been campaigning for a very long time, hitting states across the country. And what we saw last night, I think, was a culmination of her showing that she's ready, she's strong on policies, and that she knows it's going to take a ground game to continue to build and strengthen the Democratic bench, turn out Black voters, young voters, voters of color to be able to be successful this, I wouldn't say election season, because, you know, folks start voting in a couple of weeks with those early ballots going out. So we're right in it.
As early as September 6th, folks in Pennsylvania are going to cast their ballots. I mean, Aisha, to that point, if you look at those images we just had up on the screen, right, of after the vice president accepted the nomination, gave her speech, her family comes out on stage, you see a sea of people out there and balloons, big blue balloons. And a lot of folks had on white last night, and that the white was a nod to the history that was being made. I also believe it was a nod to Fannie Lou Hamer, who 60 years ago went to a Democratic convention and could not get credentials to even be seated with the Mississippi delegation. And now 60 years later, a Black woman, a woman of color, is accepting the nomination. The vice president didn't have on white, Aisha. I was watching what she had on. She had on a monochromatic blue suit. She looked like she could step right off of that stage and into the Situation Room. To me, that said that she knew that she's at work and there's still work to be done. What say you?
Oh, I like that analysis, Simone. I mean, first of all, she's fly. So let's just pause there. But, you know, what I saw on display here was the most amazing clapback, right, to the Trump campaign. Ultimately, this entire convention was designed to say those weirdos are not like us, and us is all of us that you see in this arena right now, which represents every single corner of America, every single demographic. Look at our new our first and second families to be that are standing there up on that stage right now. What we saw was really a marvel of, I think, America at its finest. And I say America at its finest as opposed to Democrats at their finest, because you had Republicans on that stage, you had young people on that stage, you showed how diverse the broad tent was. And I think that this idea that they're, that they tried to really marginalize Trump and Vance and the sycophants and the crazies, right? And say, they're not like us, they're weirdos, look at us here on display, is really, I think, speaking to so many people in this country that may not have felt reflected in a quote unquote, political party structure. But when you're watching this whole convention play out, you're like, wait a minute, that's my neighbor, that's my teacher, that's my homegirl. I feel like I'm a part of this crew. Even if I am a little more conservative than some, I can hang out with them and have a blast, right? Because this was also a big party. So I think that they were very successful in that and really marginalizing the other folks and demonstrating that America should absolutely step up behind this boss that we see there in that dope suit.
Donald Trump was apparently paying attention last night to Vice President Harris's speech. He called into Fox News actually after she finished. He was also rage posting on his social media site while it was happening. And I want to play some of that interview for you from Donald Trump post Vice President Harris's acceptance speech. Take a listen.
She didn't talk about crime. She didn't talk about 70% of our people are living in poverty. She didn't talk about housing, really. The trade deficit. She didn't talk about child trafficking that she's allowed to happen. She's going to give a tax increase of 4 to 5 times what people and companies are paying right now.
Jason, what are those cheek beeps? It seemed like he was very riled up. Did you hear the cheek beeps? I mean, did Democrats? It seems to me like Vice President Harris got under his skin a little bit.
Look, I don't know what the noise was also in the background. I would think that maybe he was on elliptical, but this is Trump. We know he doesn't exercise. Here's the thing. Every argument that he wants to make sort of policy-wise about Vice President Harris doesn't work because he doesn't have much credibility in that area. If you want to talk about the border, if you want to talk about taxes, you have to be consistent about it, and you have to demonstrate that your policies when you were president were better. And Donald Trump can't do that. So most of his anger is really about the fact that he's getting starved out, that he hasn't been able to, that the general political press in America is no longer addicted to Trumpism in the way that he had been before, and that's why he's angry.